Hello and welcome to a special celebration episode of STEM Conversations. Today we are marking International Women and Girls in Science Day, which is a day that shines a light on the contributions of women and girls across science, and it reminds us why equality in these spaces still matters. It's a chance to celebrate progress, whilst also recognising where changes are still needed and why these conversations feel as urgent as ever.
This year's theme is From Vision to Impact, which focuses on advancing gender equality in science and its wider impact across STEM fields. As part of that, there's a particular spotlight on 4 key areas: health, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, and scientific entrepreneurship, all seen as critical to reducing inequality and driving sustainable, positive change.
If you haven't noticed, we are doing things a little bit differently today. We're not going to have a guest joining us, but instead what we thought we would do to celebrate this day is we're going to be sharing some of our own thoughts and reflections on why closing the gender gap in science is still so important. We're going to be highlighting some stories of women who we think have been trailblazers, showing just how vital women and girls are to science, innovation and progress.
So let's start with some of our own thoughts, shall we? For listeners who don't work in science, why should this day matter to them?
Regardless of whether you work in science or whether you are connected to the science or STEM field at all, you still are connected to women or girls. At some point, a female is definitely going to help and support you in some form of scientific way through medicine, through advancements in AI, educating sisters or nieces. So even though you don't work in science, I think this is still a hugely important day.
Absolutely.
So when you look back at your own experiences with science, did you feel like it was a space that you naturally belonged in?
Oh, it's a good question. I feel as though as a child and a teenager, absolutely not. Any representation, even if it was jovial, Dexter's Lab or Back to the Future, and those things do come with a bit of comedy and a bit of artistic license, but still it was boys and men being scientists in a lab coat. And I just never even thought, oh, I'd like to be in that field. But I was so interested in the science of the mind and the brain, which is why I ended up studying psychology, which itself is a BSc. And in fields that are classed as social sciences, there are a lot more women. So I was able to learn all the skills I needed to work as a science teacher, such as my interpersonal skills, my written skills for my dissertation, research, analysing data, field work, the chemistry of the mind, all these things that were transferable for being a science teacher, I was able to do. It wasn't until I was in my mid-20s that I realised I so can do this. It's very fortunate that my dad, I've got a girl dad, my dad was very into physics and he'd speak to all of us about it. He wouldn't just speak to the boys about it. But it wasn't until I was in my mid-20s that I pursued it as a career option.
Why in your 20s specifically?
I was studying psychology until I was 21, and then I had a little bit of a gap between graduating and going into teaching. I worked in a home for the elderly with dementia, and that took me to about 24 before I then went to work in school. I started in my local secondary school as a cover supervisor, and I was regularly put on science cover. And I just loved it. I feel like I flourished. Do you know what it was that I loved? It wasn't necessarily the science. It was explaining the science to the students and seeing the penny drop and seeing them be like, I get it now. I ended up doing my teacher training in science, and the more I was immersed in it, the more I liked it, the more I researched it, the more I taught it, the more students got it. It went from there, really.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, that is great. And I think that is the key to teaching science well, isn't it? A lot of the concepts and processes, they are very abstract, and therefore simplifying them in a way that children, students understand is the key. So the fact that you're able to crack that, or the fact that you were passionate about getting better at that, improving that.
It was like every path I'd ever took in my life led me to that moment, because studying psychology at A level and degree level had set me up to understand the students in front of me a little bit more. But then I was
Mhm.
older and more mature and acknowledged that I deserved a space in the science scene, and I was ready to move into it. So if all those things hadn't
Wow.
aligned at that time, I honestly don't know what I would have been doing.
It's fate. It's absolutely fate.
Absolutely fate. So Sarah, do you think people underestimate how much everyday science affects their lives?
Yeah, hugely. The first question that you asked me, why should people care about this day if they don't work
Mhm.
in science? I think people underestimate how science is around us constantly. You can't get through life without science.
There are situations in life where having a good understanding of science can be so beneficial. Like my little sister very recently had to have a surgery on her kidney and essentially had a bag attached to her kidney to drain it. She was only 18, but she really understood what was going on because she'd done triple science and the kidney is in the back, triple biology. She even said to me that, yeah, it's just osmosis in it.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Maybe it allows her just to understand and process it a little bit more in
Mhm.
terms of what's happening and the surgery with that. My dad's very similar. So my dad is an engineer and 100% has that engineer mindset.
Yeah.
Like cannot go anywhere without looking at something or exploring how it works or explaining to me how something works. And it's fascinating, but he sees science in every single thing that he does. He won't mind me saying this. He's so geeky with it. There's a complete mindset for him in terms of the everyday is science. Okay, so we've had a few questions. We've got warmed up. I'm going to play a quick game with you, higher or lower. So we did play higher or lower when we had Jane Koyani on in
Yep.
episode 2. I have brought it back for International Women and Girls in Science Day. So for context, the facts that I'm going to share come from the official United Nations resources for International Women and Girls Day in Science,
Okay.
drawing on global research from organisations like
Mm.
UNESCO on gender equality in science. They do reflect real patterns that we see across education, research, and emerging scientific fields. And again, just as a caveat, these figures are correct as per recording today. First one, globally, what percentage of science graduates are women? Is it higher or lower than 40%?
I just want to think aloud because
Yeah, please do.
it's my understanding just from research more recently that there's definitely less women studying STEM subjects at university than men.
Mhm,
However,
mhm.
I could be tricked into thinking it's lower than it is by the fact that then the women that take that STEM degree to the workplace drops even further. I don't want to get those two muddled.
Mhm.
40%. I am gonna go lower.
Okay.
That's still a 20% difference between men and women, but yeah, I'm gonna go lower.
Okay. You are correct. It is
Hey!
lower. It's 35% is
Wow.
the figure percentage of science graduates that are women. So well done. 1 point. Uh, question 2. What percentage of scientific researchers are women? Is it higher or lower than 30%? Higher or lower?
Researchers in particular, I
Mhm,
do imagine that is the area of science where a lot of women would go to,
mhm.
but we already know that only 35% of graduates are women, so then that 35%, I feel like you're trying to trick me because you know I won't dare say lower twice in a row.
What you can't do, which is what you did last time, is you actually didn't play the game. You just psychoanalyzed anything. You can't do that. It's cheating.
I think it's lower. However, I think that
Okay.
out of all the women, more of them will go into scientific research, so it's really tricky, but I think it's lower.
Final answer.
Yeah.
Okay, you are wrong. You're
Yeah.
wrong. You're wrong on that one. 1 point to me because it is higher. Now, I have been a little bit mean. It is 31.3%, so it's only higher by a margin.
Right, well, Disappointing.
1
but-
point each. That's fine. You can still claw this back.
Just to clarify, you've given yourself a point because I've got the answer
Yes.
wrong, even though you know the answer.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. So the person who loses has to buy the other one a hazelnut coffee. I forgot to
Deal.
say that. Okay. We're on 1 point each.
Yep. Outrageous.
Okay, question 3. Question 3. In quantum science, what percentage of job applicants are women? Is it higher or lower than 5%?
I'm not giving you my thoughts because I feel like you just use it against me. So I'm just thinking.
Please tell me your thoughts.
Okay, my thoughts are that I've got hope in my fellow women that more than 5% would assert themselves to apply for that. Because it says applicants, it doesn't say actual people in the field. I'd like to say it's above 5% and that more women have got the confidence to go for it. So I'm going higher.
You're going higher. Okay, fine answer.
You're laughing, all right?
It's because I have an extra point there, because you are wrong. It is lower. It's 2%.
Some science is an elite in itself. I wouldn't be there, but I'd like to think that more women were than that.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it might be about representation. It might be pathways into it. There's all sorts of things to unpick from this data here. But yeah, it's disappointing to see that, isn't it? 2% of job applicants are women. Okay, final question. It all rests on this. All rests on this. If we draw, I don't know what happens, but
Just go by our own.
it all rests. In artificial intelligence research, what percentage of professionals are women? Is it higher or lower than 25%?
So my thoughts on this are, it's 2026. AI is just rearing its head, or has been for a few years. I think that now is a time where women can be more involved. It has to be higher, and if it's not, I'm very disappointed.
Final answer.
Yeah.
It is lower.
What is it? What is the...
22%.
I'm sorry, but your buffers between the actual percentage and the number you're giving me are quite tight.
They are very tight, yeah. So hazelnut coffee coming my way whenever you want to. Over the weekend might be quite nice.
You deserve it. And actually, you know what? No, I don't want to be a sore loser. I just had high hopes that the world was changing a bit more on a bit of a rapid pace, but evidently not.
And it would be interesting to see what the same statistics were in 5 years. It hopefully see some masses of progress with this, because I really feel like we're losing out on so many influential voices, opinions, the way of seeing the world. The greater the perspectives, the better that it's going to be for scientific advances, isn't it?
The personality types that different genders bring to the table complement each other so much. That's why there should be more of a balance than that.
Absolutely. And hopefully there is.
We'll work on it.
On the back of that then, I do have another question. Have you noticed ways in which women's contributions to science can be overlooked?
Yes, I have. And we've recently chatted about the Matilda Effect, which is where women's contributions to science are not given the credit they deserve, whether that's for something they've discovered or a role they played in an invention, a treatment, etc., etc. The case that springs to mind is about a woman called Henrietta Lacks. Have you heard of her?
I've not.
Okay.
And that's terrible, but no.
Well, that's the whole point in this conversation. We want to fight against the erasure of women in the history of science. Henrietta Lacks, her story is very complicated. It's got a lot of layers to it. There's the racial segregation layer, there's the gender layer, she's a woman, and there's also more of an economic layer because her and her family grew up in poverty. Now, Henrietta Lacks, at the age of 31, a mother of 5 who worked on a tobacco farm in America, had cervical cancer. And this was a time where hospitals would be very, very picky about who they were admitting, and it was quite difficult for her to find a hospital to be treated in. So she finally found a hospital that would treat her in Baltimore, John Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore. And she was being treated for the cancer. Unbeknown to her, a doctor took a scraping of her tissue, her cancer cells, and he found that they multiplied rapidly within 24 hours. Essentially, he sold them. He mass made them, or he allowed them to multiply in mass. He sold them for not millions, billions, these cells. They were pivotal in the polio vaccination, research into AIDS and cancer, and also they were involved in the cloning of a first human cell, the successful cloning of a human cell. Absolutely groundbreaking science. So yeah, sold for billions. How much money do you think Henrietta and her family got from that?
I'm hoping you're going to say more than zero.
I'm not, because they never told her they did it. They took it without ever telling her. And so she did sadly pass away of cervical cancer. Her children were raised by other family members, and if you research the children, it is so sad. One of them was institutionalized, but passed away as a teenager. Another one went to prison for murder. Her children didn't have the best time, lived in poverty. This was all, by the way, in 1951. In 2023, one of the companies involved finally made like a landmark payment to her family, and they're now involved in decisions about her gene mapping because these cells are still going.
Wow. And that was done without consent
Yep.
at all.
And that is just an example of the Matilda effect, isn't it? Although Henrietta herself wasn't a scientist, she contributed humongously to science. She saved lives, and she got no recognition until very, very recently.
That's just, it's crazy, isn't it? And the amount of times that must have happened through history as well. So that will not be a standalone case.
No.
That will have happened all the way through history.
The people had the audacity to be using her name to some extent as well, without crediting her.
And she had absolutely no... Wow.
So it would have been her 103rd birthday when her family got the financial recognition, although it's definitely been spoken about more on a moral level recently. And one of her daughters was very, very involved in fighting this, and she worked with an author to have a book written called The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. So yeah, big push from her family, and this is where we are today.
I love that the family is still pushing for that credit and where it's due as well. So I have a story that I'd like to share as well, actually. So mine is also a historical case. So it's also very much about the Matilda effect. 1856, so we are going quite far back here.
Wow.
There was a woman named Eunice Newton Foote, and she carried out an experiment that revealed something pretty extraordinary about the Earth's atmosphere. Quite a lot it's spoken about as in the first discoveries around climate science, even though it wasn't a concern or, even thought about at that point. But what she did was she used glass cylinders, thermometers, and an air pump to test how different gases responded to sunlight. So she filled the cylinders with what she called as ordinary air, moist air, and then carbon dioxide, and then measured how much they warmed up when they were exposed to sun and how slowly they cooled afterwards.
Wow.
She noticed that the cylinder filled with carbon dioxide became significantly hotter than the others, and it retained heat for longer. From these observations, she concluded, and she wrote, that the atmosphere containing higher levels of carbon dioxide would result in a higher temperature on Earth. So with that, what she did right at the very start here was identified the heat trapping properties of carbon dioxide, which is a fundamental concept behind what we understand now as the greenhouse effect. So she wrote a paper on this, and it was called Circumstances Affecting the Heat of the Sun's Rays. In August 1856, the paper was shared at a meeting of the American Association for the Advancement of Science. So it was actually shared with colleagues, with peers. However, because she was a woman, she was not permitted to present that scientific paper at that time, and she wasn't allowed to read her own work at all. Instead, her paper was presented on her behalf by Joseph Henry. So although he did acknowledge the importance of her results, she remained really largely excluded from that scientific recognition. Her paper was published in scientific journals, but it received really little attention around it. And then a couple of years later, similar experiments or the same experiments were conducted by male scientists, and they became really widely recognized and credited for that. So because of that, Foote's earlier contribution completely faded from scientific memory for more than a century, really. I think it's important to note, though, that historians and specifically climate scientists, they do recognise Eunice Newton Foote as the first person now to experimentally demonstrate the fact that carbon dioxide traps heat. But yeah, she was completely forgotten about and written out of history in that way.
Oh my gosh, the thing about not being allowed to read her own research. Why
Yeah.
would you even want to read someone else's research out? Because the confidence and like the fluency in what you're saying when it's your own is so much better. It reminds me of
Yeah.
what you were saying about Mary Anning, and she wasn't allowed to be a fellow somewhere.
Yeah, it was with the Royal Geological Society, so they didn't permit women to become fellows of that society. I can't remember the date off the top of my
Yeah.
head, but yeah, they wouldn't permit women to become fellows of that, and therefore her work wasn't recognised either.
You know, slightly unrelated, but not. It's a tenuous link. But did you know that women weren't allowed in golf clubhouses even in the 80s? So, like our parents' generation.
The 1980s?
Yeah, like women weren't allowed to go into the clubhouse of golf clubs.
Why?
I have no idea. I can only assume because we're all so gorgeous. We put them all off.
Because we'd become hysterical.
I've no idea why. I should have researched that.
Oh my goodness, I actually can't get over that.
Yeah.
So we've talked about scientists in the past, but let's bring us back towards the end of the episode to the present day.
Yeah.
What do you think schools, educators can do to celebrate and promote women in science now?
I think that representation is really important. Not only do we want women in science, but we want women to teach science, whether that's at a primary,
Mhm.
secondary, or higher education level. So I think making
Mhm.
science lessons enjoyable, trying to keep the passion in there.
Mhm.
You want the students to be engaged. So then they say, I like science. Then it still becomes a door that they might want to go through one day. The national curriculum references some scientists. For example, Watson and Crick, who actually stole a woman's work and claimed it as their own and won a Nobel Prize. As a science teacher, we know that. So let's add Rosalind Franklin in there. Let's show a woman in science. Let's get the students discussing why that's unjust. We want people to see someone who looks like them doing science. And yeah, I think that's one way that we can. Well, I suppose I gave two ways really. One, give the representation, show female scientists, but also make your science lessons exciting. Just in your passion. I don't mean you need to set something on fire every lesson. Just have those relationships with your students.
Please don't do that.
I know it's not transition day or open day. We don't need to be. But yeah,
Exactly.
make the students want to be in there so that they enjoy the lesson and it's something they're excited to do, and show them people that look like them. It takes 5 minutes now with the internet at our fingers. Have you got any ways that today, in the modern day, we can encourage more young girls to be interested in science?
Yeah, I think from a primary perspective, it's about bringing awareness to days like this, first and foremost. So it could be through assemblies, it could be through, if you're the science lead, introducing it as a celebration day within the school. So, number one, highlighting it to staff and to children why it's important that we are actually focusing on this day specifically. As well, I think it's about when children are younger, really helping them to understand what a scientist is. So
Yeah.
breaking down that stereotype of lab coat and only in a lab, that sort of thing, really help them to understand what being a scientist means. And therefore, if they're more able to see it, they're more likely to be it. But then, yeah, just to be a really passionate advocate for it. So shouting loudly, sharing stories, developing ideas, celebrating it across school so that if you are passionate about it, if you are sharing these messages and these stories, you are going to influence children to do the same. If they can see you being passionate, they're more likely to be passionate themselves. So echoing yours really around the idea of passion, but really helping younger children break down the stereotypes that they are shown constantly and understand that, number one, they are a scientist as soon as they are undertaking anything scientific.
The responsibility is more than just the education sector. I think as a
Right.
family members, if you've got children in the family, go outside and look at the stars and have a chat about space, can't you? It doesn't cost any
Love
money.
that.
Get outside. I mean, it'd be great if you could buy a little telescope and make it a little bit more hands-on. But yeah, it doesn't cost any money to go in the back garden and look at the moon and the stars and have a chat, does it? Or when you're walking past a building site with a young one, just have a little chat, look what they're doing.
I know we're wrapping up, but I do have to tell you something that brought me back to in my childhood. So my dad was part of the astronomy club, and there is a huge telescope. I know. And I remember one time we went and we camped out at the telescope, this huge, it's a big telescope, and we camped out, and then we were woken up in the middle of the night and got to see the stars. That was cool.
Wow.
That was really,
we're on such a dad hype, but my dad used to take me and my brother. In fact, I don't know how many eclipses there have been, but to like a point, you'd get these special glasses to put on and we'd like watch the eclipse.
I remember that.
Remember that?
Yeah.
I don't know how safe that is in hindsight, but obviously we only know what we know at the time.
I've enjoyed that episode, having a chat about various things in the stories.
It's very different being the person at the other end being asked a question. You did catch me off a couple of times.
Yeah. It is a lot more nerve-wracking, isn't it? I think I have underestimated when someone's firing questions at you and you're thinking off the top of your head how nerve-wracking that is.
Yeah. It has been a lot of fun. It's been good to bring up some historic figures and make sure that their names carried on.
I've got a newfound respect for our guests, so I just want to say a big thank you to them because it's quite tricky.
Thank you to all our guests.
Okay, so to wrap up our conversation, we'd just like to say thank you for listening. We hope that you feel inspired and that you celebrate the next generation of scientists with us moving forward.
And thank you to everyone listening. Don't forget to follow STEM Conversations wherever you get your podcasts and join us next time for more stories and ideas shaping science, technology, engineering and maths.